welcome to the podcast, Rachel. I'm very excited to talk to you today. We're going to cover all things courses and creating your courses. Very excited. So I just wanted to start with where your early yoga teaching career sort of looked like and your offers. Where did you get drawn into the yoga world?
Yeah, sucked in like so many of us. Self-preservation, the life preserver, starts. I think we start practicing yoga because we're like, this feels good, or I want loose hamstrings, or I want my back to feel better, or maybe I'm stressed out and need to feel a sense of groundedness. And so that was me. I was like this, frazzled little person and running around. And I took my first yoga class and it was great. But then I didn't get serious about it. You don't get serious about it until you hit a nice crisis point, transition point. Once I got my teacher training, I just fell in love with the education part of it because I love education. I love learning more about it. But it was still sort of a sideline thing until I had this really crazy kind of 6 months of my life. I mean, it was more than 6 months. It was like, years. But the transition itself, within a year, I had moved countries, bought a home, gotten married, gotten separated, lost a mother-in-law, and it changed jobs. And so everything in this whole sense of who I was and, was slowly dismantling before me. And it was at that point in my time that even though I taught before, it became much more front and center. And that's when I sort of got more full time into yoga. But yeah, like many of us, my early years are spent cutting your teeth and subbing and not making any money and running around to a lot of different places and, volunteering. I did a lot of free classes just to try to get my skills sharpened. And then over time that changed as I started to put more time into it.
And then when did you move from doing all these hustly kind of classes into the online world and creating your courses?
Yeah, so that happened. Well, okay, so it was kind of interesting for me because I became the director of Teachers College for Y Yoga in Vancouver, British Columbia, which was it was kind of like, I don't know if any of your listeners would be familiar with Yoga Works from the United States. It was kind of like a big studio system, East and West Coast, lots of studios. It was kind of like yoga franchise. It wasn't a franchise, but it was like a big yoga company. And Y Yoga wanted to be that in Canada. And so they, at our height, we had 12 studios and we're running teacher training. But at that point, I was starting to see people put online courses together. And so this had to be like 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. And I took a class with one of my favorite teachers. I adore him. But it was very challenging. I didn't feel like the online course did justice to him and to what he could offer. And I thought, I want to be able to offer online courses. I want to be able to do that well. So how do you do that? And so I started looking around for programs. And I was like, I'll go get a certificate in online course development. That'll be great. But then it turned out that getting the certificate would cost as much as getting a full master's. And so I was like, let's do it. So while I was working full time, I went back to school and got a master's in instructional systems and learning technology, which actually helped me just become a better instructional designer. So I kind of hacked my way through making courses before and making a 200-hour. And I started to learn the nuts and bolts of, there actually is a process. And you actually don't have to go and revise everything. And this can save you time. And you can do it in an organized fashion rather than just dumping your brain on the page. So I kind of learned how to do that. And from there, I became increasingly interested in doing more and more online stuff. And then, of course, I started creating an online 200-hour, and then COVID hit, and then everybody had to kind of go online. And so much more has sort of happened since then. And there's been more of a tolerance or more of a space for online education, I think, since then, because before then it was very much like go in person, for yoga especially. But now I'm for one, I'm super grateful. I'm not grateful for COVID, but I'm grateful that it drove so many of my favorite teachers online because I get to practice with like my Iyengar teacher in Vancouver and my other teacher in Istanbul. And I would not have been able to do anything like that or access them otherwise. So that's kind of when, it started to really move into the online world.
Yeah, having the internet has been a huge change for us, and you can connect with so many different people. We're on opposite sides of the world right now talking, so it's very, very good. It was interesting how you said that you noticed, so that the course that you took with one of your existing teachers that you obviously work with in person, so you know what they were like as a teacher, and then their online course didn't really do them justice. What things are different between teaching online courses versus teaching in-person courses?
Well, I think one of the hugest differences, especially for yogis who, okay, I'm going to make some terrible generalizations. This isn't true for everybody at all. But a lot of times yogis can be very like organic, intuitive feelers. They're feelers. We're kinesthetic, we're movers. And so there is a richness to being in person with people and being live with people where you can feel how it's going. I mean, this is true for people who aren't necessarily yogis too, but you get a sense. You're like, you read the room. Whereas when you're online, you can't do that. And this teacher is very magical, but he also has such a wealth of knowledge. He could just go down these crazy tangents. And he was a scholar too. But when you're online, it's like you can't just sort of dump a 2-hour video on someone and hope that it lands. It's too much. In fact, here's a crazy thing for everybody to know is that best practices for video length for an online course is like 6 minutes, because people, it's like you want to take that majestic lecture. When you have people in a constrained space, you can hold their attention raptly, great. But, most of our online folks are squeezing it in before, running off to work or going on an errand, or their kids yelling at them, or their husband needs something, or their wife is yelling, all these things. And so the little snapshots where we can get a juicy nugget and then kind of apply it and get that's what we have time for. We don't have the luxury to sit for 2 hours, right, without the in-person presence. So there's different ways that we have to think about creating an online program. And you can still bring all your awesomeness and your charisma and your vitality and so much of that good juiciness to an online course as well. And that can translate. But you just have to be a little bit more strategic about it, I think, than you would in person.
So you kind of want to make sure it's like one little nugget per video and like really break things down.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have like a lot of those videos. You could have 10 videos, but you want like one little nugget. You want to describe it. You want to say like, what's the key idea? How would they apply it? I like people to take those ideas and like, how do I apply it? Why is it relevant to me? What does that mean? And then move on to the next idea. And that's going to be, I mean, you don't have to be so dogmatic about 6 minutes, but that's a good time that people can bring their full presence to something that's online. When we have people, it's like when you're talking to somebody in person and they're in your face, you're less likely to be checking your phone right in front of them. Online, there are so many things to look at on your computer and on your phone, and very few of us are disciplined enough to turn us onto focus mode and turn the emails off and turn the bingers off and all that stuff. So keeping a little shorter is better.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to that as well, because you can carve out 6 minutes a lot easier than you can carve out 25 minutes. Depending on what it is. Obviously, if you're going to do an actual yoga practice per se, then you want to have those longer videos. The teaching, that makes a lot of sense. Would you say today, because we talked about everyone getting driven online, is it necessary to have an online course, do you think, or an online presence?
That is such a good question. Excellent question. Yeah, no, not at all. You totally don't have to. You don't have to be online. You don't have to be on social media. You don't have to do any of those things. You could work at a studio in person that does all the marketing for you and gets all the students, and you just show up and you teach. Totally cool. Maybe you just work with that in-person studio. There's no need to do that unless it serves your mission and your vision and your passion. And this is why I think it's really important for teachers out there to think about before they start jumping through all the hoops of social media and creating online courses, is to really come home to, what is my mission? What do I love sharing? What lights me up? Because when we're connected to the thing that lights us up, then we don't burn out. We're not exhausted by it. It nourishes us, And online is a great way if you want to connect to people in a virtual space. If you want to perhaps extend your brand or your reach beyond your geographic location. And if you don't mind being in front of a camera and doing those things. And there might be, depending on how you do it, there might be some technical stuff. So do you have friends who can help that, or you do have a tolerance for doing that kind of work? And if you don't need to do that or don't want to do that, then absolutely not. Online is not required. It's just an option.
Do you have any tips for anyone that's like, oh, I don't really want to be on camera, but I do want an online course?
Yeah, for sure. You can create an online course and you don't have to be on camera. You can do lectures that are PowerPoints and where you're using other videos or things like that. But that said, students need to feel connected to their teacher. And when you're online, one of the ways that we can feel connected is by seeing you talk and by seeing you visually and by feeling your presence. And that's what is going to attract people to connect with you. So I wouldn't want to deprive your students of that emotional connection. I would say, see if you can increase your tolerance for that discomfort for the sake of the connection that you will gain.
That's good advice. And it does get easier. I didn't like recording myself or listening to myself the first time you hear yourself. You're like, is that what I sound like? And then the more it just becomes a bit more normal.
Did you have to kind of reframe anything for yourself, or was it just like you got used to it?
Probably just more getting used to it and just like listening to it over and over again. And then, yeah, I don't think I really reframed anything. I just did it enough times and pushed through that. It didn't take too long, to be honest, either. Just after because you've got to edit and things, so you have to listen to yourself. So then just once you've sort of heard it over and over again, you're like, hey, this is kind of not as weird now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good for people out there to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to feel intuitive or comfortable at first for it ultimately to become something that you can develop skills with.
Yeah. And now I weirdly go back and watch my own videos on Instagram sometimes. You're like,
oh, is that?
I like it. I'm my own biggest fan. I'm like, oh, that was hilarious.
That's great. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so you can definitely get there. For yoga teachers, especially if you're starting out, what point are you kind of like ready? Do you have to do so many hours in person before it's kind of a good idea to transition? Can you just sort of jump into the online space? How do you know if you're ready to be able to create an online course?
Yeah, well, I think, there's two different things we could talk about. We could talk about an online course or online classes, because I think of them just a little bit differently. And I would say that there's a couple of permissions we need to give to ourselves as we're embarking on our journey here. Just like the human journey, that we need to give ourselves permission to grow. So, to create classes that, 5 years later, you'll look back on and go like, whoa, right? That was a time and place. Just like an artist would look back on Picasso, looking back on his blue face and going like, oh, it's just so terrible or whatever,
Yeah.
Probably not. But, we want to be able to give ourselves the grace and the space to know that we're going to progress. We're going to take a journey, and the way you teach now might not be the way you teach in 5 years. And that's okay. Like a video is a time and a space. And that's fine. And that we only get better through doing, there's this illusion. I mean, I'm sure you've touched on this, but there's this idea that I'll do it once I'm comfortable, or I have to be confident. And it's the inverse, right? You act in order to create confidence. You act in order to get the experience. You're not going to have to start off with. This is like you were saying with your videos. You start off and it feels weird. And that's the way it's going to be for any new endeavor. So don't wait to feel right. It's never going to feel right. And then a year from now, you'll be going like, it still doesn't feel right. It's like, and besides, since online they're similar, of course, there's similar crossover skills, but online is a little bit different. So I'd say just jump in the pool, like start filming yourself, get your iPhone out. There's, there are the bumps. I mean, I've just got AirPods in right now. And so if your AirPods work well, that can be something that you use to record yourself too. Not on your iPhone though. They don't work on recording on your iPhone, but on your computer. But and just go for it. Like, play with, hey, how do I set up my space? Voila, this is my space. But how do I set up a nice, clean filming space? How do I get good sound? I mean, these are things you're going to want to think about. How do I make it easy for myself? So I think this is what I'd say to those who are starting out, lower the bar to you having to do it. So if possible, create one blank wall in your house that could always be your filming space. That's always set up and it's pretty well lit and it doesn't have extraneous sound, and you lower the barriers to you actually getting to the mat and filming something. And start small. Film a 5-minute breath practice. That's not too scary. Start little and then build your library over time.
Yeah, that's good advice. Reminded me of this interview that I heard. I can't remember who it was with, but it was a woman talking about, she had a Facebook group and she was like, I'm going to start doing lives when I get to 1,000 people in my group. And that's when I will start being online, being more present in the community. And then she got to 1,000 and she was like, okay, well, now I have to. I made this promise to myself. And she was like, I really wish I'd started when there was like 10 people in my group, because now I'm doing it in front of 1,000 people. Everyone's seeing me learn. rather than just a couple people seeing me learn. And by the time I would have got to that 1,000, I would have been so much more confident in actually doing it.
That is a really great story. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, get started early. So if they've got imposter syndrome around this, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that happen. I mean, first of all, we all have imposter syndrome. We all do at different points. And until we have been doing something a long time, and even then, when you've been doing something for a long time, still we can have these moments of just like, oh, what am I doing? Is it good enough? I don't know. So know that the emotion is not the truth, right? The emotion is a signal of, oh, I'm nervous, or this is new. This is uncertain territory. So know that that's what that signal is. It's not that you're not good enough or that you don't have something to offer. So start there. And then you ask, what do I have to offer? And you can think about your target demographic. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, I want to do a course on the chakras, but there's a billion courses out there. That might be true, but there's no course of you teaching it the way that you would teach it coming through you. And there's also no course necessarily for your community. So just know that the fact that you are bringing these transmissions through yourself immediately makes them unique, because you'll have a different lens on these teachings or what you're offering than someone else will. And there are going to be people out there in the world, your community, who, like, for some reason, they resonate with your vibe. They feel comfortable with you. They feel safe with you. They trust you. And they also probably know less than you about this subject. So we don't have to be the world's expert in order to create a course. We just have to have something of value to offer that might be more, that might help our target market get something new. So you just have to know more than your students in a way, right? Which kind of takes the pressure off. It's like, I don't have to be a scholar on this. I just have to have something that I want to offer that I'm excited about. And that can be of value and be of service.
You mentioned, like, if you want to teach something on the chakras, how do we know what topic to pick? So is it a good idea just to pick something that you're really interested in and you want to teach? Or is there a better way of figuring out what your course should be about?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways to do that. I think one, it definitely needs to be something you want to learn about and that you're excited about. And here's the funny thing. It's like, I was just talking to one of my girlfriends today who's a co-trainer. We've both been teacher trainers for a long time. And we lead our 300-hour together, and she knows a lot. And I just bought a harmonium, which I'm so excited about. And I was telling her, I'm like, Mel, it's time. I'm going into mantras. I haven't been like mantra, kirtan. That hasn't been my world, my area of expertise. And I'm like, I'm going to learn about this, because I also want to bring this to my students. And I know that through putting a deadline on myself, or through having the ambition and the desire to bring this to my students, it will shore me up and give me purpose for doing it and learning it myself. So when you create a course, if it's something that you are excited about and passionate about, that's great. The idea that I want to bring this out to the world can often inspire you to like dig deeper, to expand your knowledge, to get some, like, to really do our homework and to dig into it for ourselves so that we can share it. And I would say we really want to share things that we've integrated. Like, I would want to share things, and that might mean that, that I share only a certain amount of the practice. It doesn't mean that I can't share at all, but it just might mean I share to the capacity that I have, that I feel like I own now, that is mine, so that it can come through me and be a unique expression of this understanding, if that makes sense. So, like, I don't need to, if I'm sharing the chakras, I don't have to go crazy esoteric about it, but I will share what I know and what I feel like is in my basket, right? And we never have to share beyond ourselves. There's plenty in your basket already.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there any way to know that that's going to resonate with your audience or your community?
Yeah, and this goes into like sneaky marketing too, which is, well, I mean, first of all, I think the most important thing is that you're excited about it, and also that it's an expression of your brand. And by that, I mean like of who you are, what you're trying to create in the world. But also you can, sure, if you've got like a few things that you're interested in and you're not sure where to start, then a great thing to do is poll your community to like send out, if you're on social media, you could send out like a little Instagram poll, or you could send out a newsletter, or you could just ask people and say, I've got these 3 things that I'm really interested in. What would be most of service to you, if any of them? And then see what kind of feedback you get. And that's also, it's a nice way. It's like sneaky marketing, because you're kind of telling people about your thing that's too calm without actually pitching it to them, which is a nice way to kind of get people. This is the thing, folks. If you create a course or an offering, we all want to hide it because we're scared, right? We're like, what's going on in your life? Oh, everything's fine. I'm not, right? So it's like, get in the habit of sharing it and being like, I don't know, but put it out there,
Yeah.
right? We get it.
Any tips around that? Because it can be pretty vulnerable to put something out that's really close to your heart, especially with this type of course where you've put all your passion and you've integrated your learnings into it. And then it can be a bit scary to release that to people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, just fuck it, do it. Just do it. But that said, what you can do to kind of step yourself into that is what I'd say is do a beta test group, right? Get friends who are kind and honest. A couple of people, you don't need a lot, just a couple of people who are curious and would step up to do it. People who, aren't crazy busy, and give them free access to your baby project and have them take a look and give you their loving feedback. So before you release it out into the world, you can have a smaller group kind of check it out. Or you could always enlist the help of somebody who does this sort of thing to look at it too. Like I'm not the only instructional designer on the planet. You could definitely work with an instructional designer or have a coach or take an instructional design course just so that you feel confident about the structure that you've created. So you feel like, okay, I know, because we kind of lose perspective when we're in the weeds, and no course is perfect. You guys, I've been going back and editing stuff, and I like to do like revisions every little while. And I'm like, so we find things later. It's not going to be perfect. It's like that beautiful, how they say in Turkey, they're like, every rug must have a flaw because only God is perfect. Your course will not be perfect, but you can bring some loving people in there and just iron out the kinks and get some feedback on it. And you can also get that kind of feedback before you've created the whole thing. So it might be nice to create a first part of your course, like, create like 10% of it. And then so you can catch anything and make any shifts you want to before you put a huge amount of work in. But this actually comes to instructional design and how you can sort of be confident in what it is. There is a process called instructional design, especially useful for online courses, that helps you just create, it's not rocket science, but it helps you create a roadmap of how you're going to get yourself from A to Z. So that you can really look at all the content in advance. So here's I guess I'll dial it down to this. My big tip is before you start creating, because many of us, we just want to jump in and start filming things or making things, writing handouts. Before you do any of that, and this is a tough discipline, but make a course map, organize your material, like your topics. If you're doing a lecture or a video or a handout, what kind of activities you're including, how the students are going to be assessed, like write the whole thing out and take a look at it, because that'll allow you to see your course. Doing that kind of work rather than just jumping in is actually what will also help you to be more confident at the end of it, that you've created something intentional. So that would be my advice.
That is a very good tip. And then I guess you can start to get feedback on that even in the first stage from those people that you trust. And then someone might find a big thing in your map that they're like, oh, I don't know if that resonates, or that bit doesn't link to that for me or something. You can fill that out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great to do the map first, because the map is actually, this is going to sound crazy, but creating your course map is actually like the most time consuming part of the process. I mean, video editing, yeah, is kind of its own beast, but creating the course map, if you do it well, everything is laid out for you. And then you can be super efficient when you're in the actual creation process, because you're like, oh, this handout needs to have this. This video needs to talk about these 3 points. And so it makes it super easy to actually kind of, in a weird way, do that generation part, because the course map is all laid out. So it'll save you a lot of time in the end, although I will admit they often make me want to pull my hair out when I'm actually doing them, but they're very worth it.
So very detailed then for these maps. Get into like everything that you're teaching.
Yeah, you don't have to write if you know like the handout and the content that's going to be there, you don't have to write it all out, but you do want to go, it's going to be the handout that describes this. It's the video, which is going to touch on these 3 points. These are, my learning objective. This is what I want them to get to in this module. This is the quiz. These are the quiz questions, actually, or how I'm going to assess them. Those are actually useful to have written out in your map.
And would you start from the start of the map, or are you working backwards because you've got your goal?
So good. You want to actually kind of do sort of both. You start at the beginning. Well, you start with the big picture, and you start with, and then you actually start with the end. So you go, what do I want students to remember about this course in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What's the big idea that just helps us see the forest for the trees? And then you actually start with the end. So you say, at the end of this process with me, what are they going to be able to do? And this is key, to do, not to say, not to think, not to know, not to understand, not to feel. What are they going to be able to do that they couldn't do at the beginning? And if you can articulate usually like 5 to 6 sentences of this is what they're going to be able to do and show that they couldn't do at the beginning, then that's going to really help you to understand what your course is about. And once you know that, it makes it a little bit more clear what you actually need to leave out and what you need to put in. Because sometimes we want to give, and I'm totally like this. I want to give everything. I want them to know so much. Like I want to just give them everything in my head. I get so excited, but that's too much. We actually need to whittle that down and find the essence, like find the little jewel, and be disciplined about not throwing in a lot of extraneous stuff so that they can really get the jewel that you want them to get.
That's a good tip. So yeah, you're kind of working in the middle, yeah, but mostly backwards. Yeah.
Mostly backwards.
So you've got this plan. We're going to be video recording and we're going to be doing videos ourselves because we want to get that connection with our audience. Now, what do we need to know tech-wise? That's usually a really big question I see come up a lot.
Yeah. And, I was super relieved. So when I went to school for instructional design and learning technology, I thought I would be learning about learning technology. I thought, great. They'll teach me the tech. And there was some of that, but there actually wasn't very much because it turns out that the tech is not as important as you would think. And we just want to talk about this because there's like the learning platforms out there and all of these programs and stuff. And yes, you will need to do some videoing and we can talk about that. But you can have an online course that is like made out of a YouTube video playlist, emails, and handouts that you email. So it doesn't have to be a fancy big platform. You don't have to invest like hundreds of dollars a year, $1,000 a year for a platform yet that you don't know about. You can create a really good distance learning experience with very simple tools. So, yay, that's good to know. Now, video and video editing is probably the thing that is kind of like the most. And where do I put it? Well, filming on your iPhone, these things or your Android, which is probably here has a better camera than my iPhone. I hear it's better. Yeah.
I have my Android specifically because of the camera.
Right?
Yeah.
What kind of propaganda is this? Yes. Well, anyway, so use your phone. I recommend getting a tripod just because it makes it so much easier to put your phone. For years, I was putting my phone on bookshelves and trying to tilt it. It always falls over and putting it on yoga blocks. Just get a tripod. You can get them real cheap on Amazon or wherever. It just makes life so much easier. And then you want a nice space and you just plunk it down. And if you're sitting close to the camera, then there's no problem. You can just talk to your camera. The mic is good enough. If you're going to be moving, you could use whatever your AirPods are, or the Android version of AirPods. Or you could invest in a mic. They've got mics that are wireless only if you're going to be moving around at a distance because you need the sound to come with you. If you're demonstrating and doing yoga and stuff like that, and you're back and forth, or you could conceivably do a voiceover, but that makes life a little bit more challenging. Anyways, but film it on your phone. And then you can either edit it on your phone. If you're just doing cuts on the end, you might just trim it. It could be that simple, if you're not doing editing and things like that. Now, if you want to get into editing, this is where you either kind of just like, you're going to have to, it's like the part where you just got to like go like, I'm giving myself 2 weeks to learn iMovie or 2 weeks to learn Filmora or Captivate or whatever the heck it is. There's a bunch of different ones. You find one that works with your computer. You find one maybe that your friends like, that's easy. There are probably some online video editors too that you could use. And you just kind of kick the tires on them until you find one that feels simple enough. Now, we don't need anything fancy. Most of the time, we're just talking like a cut and maybe some cuts in the center, right? But this is going to be the part where you just have to just accept it's bum and share time. It's just about setting yourself down and giving yourself I got 8 hours over the course of 2 weeks to just sit here and play with this and futz with it and see and figure out what editing software works for you. And then you can upload it to, like, again, real simple YouTube, private playlists. YouTube is a great place for us to share and showcase things that we want to share with other people, like free stuff that we might want people to get to know us by. But you can just pop it up there. I mean, and there are other video libraries that you can use, but the editing is the part that's probably going to be the most nail-bitey for some of us, right?
Yeah, and I've very frustratingly found that my phone edits better than my computer sometimes in terms of just like the software crashing on my computer. My computer's pretty good, but Filmora and my computer, when they work great, they work great. And then some days I don't know why they just don't. And then I can do it on my phone so easy. It can just process everything so quickly.
It's amazing, right? So do you use Filmora on your phone?
Yeah, for a lot of things. I do on my computer as well, but if it's something I've recorded on my phone, then also like uploading it to the computer and things. So if I've recorded it on my phone, I can edit it on my phone and then I can upload it from my phone, which is crazy to me. Being a child of the 90s, I didn't grow up with all this.
They flew sent people to the moon on less than this.
Yeah.
Right? Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely, depends on your phone, it depends on your computer and that kind of thing as well, and the processing power, but you can definitely do a lot just on phone apps for editing. As long as it's basic.
Yeah. We don't need anything. Generally, we don't need fanciness. So I think the phone is a great idea. I use something called Camtasia, which totally crashes, but fortunately does autosave.
Yeah.
But the reason I use it is because I like to do educational stuff. So the only reason I use it is because it's super easy to put in like graphics of like text and call out boxes and things like that. So it's good for educational, just sort of like writing words and stuff like that. Yeah.
Have a look at that. It's good to, yeah. And I think where it comes back as well, what we were talking earlier about, like, don't get too hung up on making it be the best video that it can possibly be. Let your editing skills grow as you do as well. Just start with getting those basic edits in so it's something watchable, and like you said, cropping the ends and or the middle somewhere if you need to. That's what you really need to do at the beginning.
Yeah, and let your cat be in it or your dog be in it. People love that. You don't have to take them out.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. And I say, like, when you're starting a new project like this, shoot for a good 80%. Like my perfectionists out there, the perfectionists have the roughest time with this, especially because there is some theoretical perfect you could achieve when you're editing something. So I'd say this is the time to work on your perfectionism and shoot for 80. Like someone used to say, done is better than perfect. And that's absolutely true, especially when you're starting off.
Yeah. This is definitely a challenge for the perfectionists out there. Don't compare yourself to the ones that have been in editing business and have like their partner does all of the editing and they're a film expert.
Those people.
Yeah, they're beautiful. You'll get there one day. So we've got this beautifully recorded course now. Do you have it run as an evergreen course, or do you have it run as like a specific start date? What could it look like from a marketing and delivery perspective?
Yeah, this is great. So when you're thinking about your course, there's this idea that we'll just create this course and we'll put it on our website and people will just buy it night and day and yay, we don't have to touch it. And I don't think that's actually a great scenario. So there's two reasons that I want your course to have a start and an end date. And one of those reasons, well, there are several reasons. That having the start and the end date, one, is great for marketing because people are so inundated with things they can do and deadlines and other priorities that unless there is a time sensitive marker on something, they won't sign up because they're kind of like, oh, I could do it later. And so they don't sign up for it. So I think having a deadline so you can have like a marketing early bird deadline or a sign up by or this is the end date is really a useful marketing tool. And by marketing tool, I don't mean you're tricking people. I mean that you're helping them to make it a priority, right? If they go like, I really want to do this. There's so many things going on. Nope, this deadline is going to help me commit now. And then they also see how long it is. And you get really clear about like, it's this many hours a week and this is what it is. And you give them deadlines to help them because part of what you're doing in an online course is really trying to avoid the horrible attrition rates. But like those massive online courses run by, Cornell or whoever, it's like they have a 95% attrition rate. because nobody is pulling them through. So when you have a start and end date and can give people actionable and reasonable goals, I'd say a couple of hours a week. Really, for most folks, that's more than enough. You give them actionable goals. And by you doing that, I also think it's a great idea for you. Remember, people love you. They want to interact with you, is to have those in-person touch points along the way. And so you could have like a weekly group meeting, or you could have a meeting every 2 weeks, or, however you wanted to do it. Depends on the nature of your course, but where you show up live, because one, that will improve people's motivation. And two, it will give them the opportunity for direct feedback from you and direct interaction with you. Faculty interaction is important. And also student-to-student interaction is important. And if you have a specific start and end date, you can connect those cohorts together to support each other, to chat about things, to, coach each other, to also keep each other motivated, to stay on track. So that's why I really like not having an evergreen course, but having start and end date specifically.
And on that, do you pre-record your entire course? Do you work with it throughout that sort of date set area?
You can do it either way. So I'd say you go back to your course map, right? And in your course map, you might figure out that there are some parts, some activities that are really good for lectures. And by that, I mean, you want them to go back and watch them. It's key ideas, or it's like foundational concepts you want them to review. And then you might find that there are some activities or tasks or things that need to happen where that feedback is really important. Or in yoga teaching, it could be yoga teaching. Like if people are going to have to like teach skills or like do pranayama or anything like that, having them in person so you can be with them, that might be in your course map. That might be you being there being the best way to teach it. So I'd say let your course map and your activities and your learning goals be your guide on that. You don't have to you don't have to fabricate it. You can look at your course map and say, what would be the best topic to be in person on? And how can I, make it the most effective learning experience in that way?
Would you change this depending on whether it's the first time you've run your course or the 10th time you've run your course? Like, can you make it more evergreen later, or is it still in this sort of climate good to have that live component?
I'm, fan of the live component, but that doesn't mean you can't keep building and growing. So one of my teachers kind of does it this way. He has a massive online course library of what we might call evergreen stuff. So his strategy, he does a membership site. So for whatever per month, you can come and you can access any of the courses, and he's got like 20. I mean, it's a font of information. But he also does weekly meetings with everybody. And so from any course. So rather than him tying his presence to one particular course, which would actually become a lot of work over time, he just shows up for the whole community once a week and everybody comes. And so no matter where you are, you can do Q&A and everybody learns something. So that's a way to do it. If you want to like build, there are ways that you can be strategic about your time, because that's one of the reasons that we're creating online courses, is so that we can make the most of our own value, right? So that we don't have to be there physically in order to impart this knowledge or this experience. So I think you can get savvy about it, but I'd always want to see some in-person component there.
I think there definitely is a bit of a shift from this like pure evergreen to like people want to connect with people more and more now. And you want to like know your teacher and who you're buying from. That whole know, like, trust factor coming into
what is
know, like, trust.
No, like trust. Okay.
I'm getting into marketing territories a little bit now. And then, yay. So you've got it all. You've got it ready. You've timed your dates. How do we get it in front of people? How do we market this to people? It's a big question.
That is a big question. No, I'm not a marketer, so I'll just tell you. So I'll tell you right now, my version of marketing is make the best online course you can, because that will be its own value. And that said, you can have thoughts about it. So, I think for me, I think that the best marketing is more like the organic marketing rather than paid marketing. To me, paid marketing is for that first thing, no. It's for that know and like section where it's like, hey, I haven't been doing Facebook ads for a while, but back in the day what I would do is I would Facebook ad free stuff, not paid stuff. So I would get things out there for people that were valuable and resources, and I would use the Facebook as a way to get that reach wide. And then those people would be part of my community, and then I could market to them or let them know what I was doing. but I wouldn't spend money on being like, come to this course and you've never heard of me, So that's kind of how I did it. I would say any marketing efforts that you do, one is, folks, is you just have to tell people. This is the first thing, is that we get shy and we don't tell people. So if you've created something, your marketing is about you talking it up. And and it doesn't mean that it has to be perfect. You could be like, you could just be honest. I'm so excited about this. I'm also a little nervous, but this is what we're going to learn. It's going to be, I think it's going to be really cool. So tell people in your class. So you don't have to go out and, learn Google Ads to do that. You put it on your website. You add it to your link tree on social media. You make it an easy link for people to find. You get your friends to check it out, and maybe they can share it too, other people who are in your world. You tell the people from your community about it. And then if you want to do something like, do paid ads, which again, I don't think it's necessarily necessary to do that. Like, I am not a fan of those things. It's like, I created my first online course and had 1 million subscribers. And I hate those people so much, because I'm like, that's because you spent 1.2 on marketing or advertising. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, no, I hate that. It's so cheesy. So instead, I would say, just target your people and the people who will benefit most from your course. And if you brainstorm a bit, you'll figure out kind of where that lives. And that could be on alignable pages. It could be on Facebook pages. It could be boosting your Instagram post and your Facebook post just so they get out in front of your own community. But sometimes it's just about being willing to toot your own horn a little bit. Now, I will say, I'm a big fan of, because of we have those drop dates, I'm a big fan of early birds, because early birds will often get people to invest in marketing, get them to invest in a course, because they see that they're about to lose a good deal. So I think an early bird price is great. But Adrienne, you are the marketer extraordinaire. So what are your thoughts? How would you tell people?
I'm a big fan of, I was going to say network marketing. That's not the right one. Networking and collaborative marketing efforts, and like finding, probably if you're doing a local thing and you're just getting started, what other local businesses can you team up with and share something. You can do it in so many different ways. You can do like competitions. You could just be like, hey, look, I'm doing this. Would you share this with your audience? And I'd be happy to share your business with my audience. I think that is really powerful. There's a website which I haven't used extensively yet, but called Collabosaurus, which helps connect people with these sort of efforts. So you could have a look at that, but you can also just look at, who do you follow? Who do you have connections with in the marketing world? Who can you reach out to and be like, hey, I've got this going. Would you be willing to share it? Or let's do a team up thing and all that kind of thing. I'm a big fan of that, to get in front of new audiences.
Such a good idea. Yeah.
It's very fun. And like, you don't have to go as big as the summit. Obviously, the summit, that's kind of like the core of it. You're like connecting with other people in your industry. And it's also a really fun way of just meeting other people with like-minded values as well in the business world, and making friends, as cheesy as that sounds. But I really like that. I'm not an ads expert, so I can't dive into that, but I can definitely see the value in ads if you're wanting to spend that money on it. But if it's your first course, I'd be a bit wary about that, just in terms of costs, depending on your personal financial situation and things. They're getting more expensive than what they used to be.
Yeah. And I don't like, I went through this thing. I worked with an ad agency. I tell you, it's never gone well. When I've done that and spent bunches of money, it hasn't really gotten me it hasn't been so useful. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we underestimate our own community. It's like, I think some brilliant marketer had something like 100 true fans. That's all you need. Gosh, like that would be amazing. And also just to trust your course to grow over time, that the first time out doesn't need to be 1 billion people. Like, it's like, let it be a small, intimate, wonderful experience, and that you'll learn from that, improve the course too, make tweaks, and then they'll tell people, and you can reach out to them. You could say, hey, can I get a testimonial? And then you have another thing to share about it. So let it build. Like, it can be organic.
Yeah, that's good advice. And also, it's what you can manage, because I think we hear all these drama stories about, I did my first course and I made my $500,000 or whatever, ridiculous stories that you hear. And then you're like, are you actually capable? Because we're probably doing live components, as we discussed. Are you set up to have 250 people in your live components, is that something you really want to start out with? Or is it 10 people and maybe you're just breaking even for that first one just to like test the waters and for your own benefit? And then next time you can tweak it and you see where you need to sort of fix things or make it grow that way.
Well, totally. And the thing about an online course too is that you're not really supposed to break even the first time. I mean, it's great if you do. If you do, that's amazing. But the whole point of it is that you do all the work at the beginning, and then in your future courses, you show up for an hour and a half a week or whatever. Yeah, it's going to be more than that. It's true. But you're doing a massive amount of work. You're like at the beginning, but then you don't, but then it's in. And so that's why you want to do it so well, because then it's in the bag. Then you've got it. And then you can make fine tuning things, but then it's like you created your value. Online courses can pay themselves off over 3 runs, and then it's like more and more profitable as you run it. So just so people don't kind of go like, oh my gosh, I put in so much. I never even think about, how much time I put in. You just do it. It's like giving birth to my baby. It's all the effort.
Yeah.
But we should talk about pricing. Maybe talk about pricing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's a lever for marketing.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just bouncing off what you said with goal setting. So when you're starting out, what do you actually want the goals to be before you're diving into that monetary thing? What would make this successful for you other than being a monetary venture for that first course? Because as you've said, it'll pay itself off in the future, but you want to actually create it. Maybe that's your whole goal, or you want to learn XYZ from doing this and that's your whole goal. And then that will make it seem successful, even if financially wasn't, because that can also be tricky with people aren't entrepreneurs in your circle, like friends and family, that they see you pull this work into it and they're like, how much did you make? And you're like, oh, I made this much. And they're like, that was probably like $10 an hour or something. And you're like, yeah, but it was really valuable and I learned so much and that wasn't my goal. And so it makes you feel a bit better, and then it helps you feel more confident, because people will potentially be like, go get a real job. Why are you wasting your time on this? When you know what you're getting out of it. I think that's really useful.
That's very smart. Yeah. And also, once you make it, once you know how to do a course map, and the first time is going to be the longest because you're figuring all those elements out. The time you do it after that, it's going to be easier. It'll be faster.
Yeah.
The first time is the hardest because you're learning so many new things. So, but Adrienne, that's exactly why making those goals, I think, is like, that's such a smart piece of advice for people.
Yeah. But yeah, let's definitely dive into pricing as well.
So I'll just say that I don't know how there's different schools of thought out there. So there's I'm going to go low and get tons of people, or I'm going to go high and it's a premium product and I'll get like 4 or maybe, so you might sort of see where you fall on those kinds of things. I'd say, for me, when I think about after I've created the course, I think a little bit about what I put into it, but I actually just sort of forget about how much I put into it. And instead I think about how much time is this going to take of mine? Like how many hours a week is it going to take? And it's not just going to be that hour that you spend in person, but it's also going to be the emails and the admins and registrations. There's going to be some of that and back and forth, of course. So you kind of calculate out how many hours is this going to take, figure out what that is, and then you figure out what you need to charge, like what your student minimum is. Like I won't run with less than 6 students, might be the way you think about it. And then you say, okay, if I have 6 students, then this has to be the price point in order for me to make this much an hour. And you can start there. So I think about, and then maybe you add a premium for, and this is compensating for the fact that I just did all that crazy work. That's how I tend to think about my courses. Yeah. Rather than thinking about trying to pay off what I've already put in. No.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think also think about who your target audience is with this. What can they genuinely afford? I had a friend a few years ago, and the amount that she's asking for is the very high premium, high ticket. And I'm not saying it's not worth that, but there was just like a little bit of a disconnect with who she was targeting and that high ticket. And I was like, you can't target young mums and young families necessarily if you're doing this sort of like higher level. Like you might want to be targeting a different age demographic, or just think about don't underestimate. I think people often go, oh, I couldn't afford it, so they couldn't. That's not necessarily true. They might be able to, but definitely think about sort of what realistically would fit into someone's budget of who you're targeting.
Yeah, that is very wise. And one way around, or not around this, but one way to kind of say uphold your value, but accommodate if somebody can't afford something, is you could also offer sliding scale or discounts. That's one of the great things about having your own business, is you can give scholarships to things, or you can make that part of your marketing strategy where you say the full price is this and the early bird is this, and this is why you can get in. But or work study positions and things like that. Like in programs that I've run, we've had some flexibility with pricing, based on student need and things. So that's one of the things you get to be in charge of. I always think it's useful if you really have a clear feeling about what the value is. Great, tell everybody what the value is, and then also communicate that you're amenable to sliding scale. So you can have a little bit of it. Could maybe have it a little bit both ways.
Yeah, there's definitely. I don't think there's any wrong answer per se for the pricing. There's so many things you can do about it, and that is, like you said, the good thing about having your own business is that you can do it in different ways if you like. And the scholarship thing's quite fun as well, depending on who you're wanting to target. And that's a cool marketing thing. People like that.
I'd also say it's okay to start low and build up. So the first, you don't want to feel like you're losing money, but you might set a price where you feel like, I want to make this really accessible. Because if you're still kicking the tires and a little nervous, and it's the first time you've run it, you might go like, yeah, there's going to be some like bumps along the way. So I'm going to price this a little lower because we're a little bit in that beta testing mode. And then once you become more confident in the value of what you're offering, you might raise your price down the road. So don't be shy also about making it accessible.
Yeah, the first year I run the summit, I run it well under price. It was pure confidence because I'd never done it before, and I was like, I don't know what to expect. And all of the business coaches were like, you should have it this much. And I was like, no. And then I did put it up this year, and it's still well underpriced for what it was as well. But yeah, it's okay. You'll learn a lot. Cool. So how can people connect with you to learn more?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm always available for online chat. I call them virtual coffee because coffee is one of my favorite beverages. But my website is rachelyoga.com, RACHEL, and you can go there. There's like a contact me page. There's a, book a free chat with me. And I'm serious, book a free chat, book a chat with me. I love to just connect. It's like online. I get to connect with you, Adrienne, and you're like way across the world. So it's nice to be able to make those connections and say hi. And I do have some resources for folks who are looking to do online content. So, just hit me up, or on social media and on YouTube, I'm Rachel Scott Yoga. So you can also find me there, say hi on Instagram. I am on the Instagrams more than the Facebook thing. I don't know why. I just sort of gravitate to Instagram more. So I just,
everyone does at the moment.
Yeah. Except for my dad. My dad.
Oh, yeah.
On Facebook.
Yeah. Cool. And yeah, I'll put all the links in the show notes for everyone so they can connect with you really easily. And my last rapid fire question. So if you could turn to yourself in the first year of becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur, what advice would you give?
I want to be patient, and it could go better than you think. I think sometimes when we start off on our own, I thought, this is going to be terrible. I'm going to lose so much money. And it was like, who knows? Maybe it'll go better than you think, and also be patient.
That is great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime in the future.